Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. And today we have Toni here in her super cute pink headphones. You'll see if you're watching on YouTube. How you doing, Toni?
Thank you for having me, and thanks for the compliment. I do like my pink headphones.
So before we dive into everything I want to cover today, can you just give a really brief introduction to a little bit about you and who you serve with your business?
Absolutely. My name is Toni Marinucci. I am a registered dietitian who ironically teaches people how not to diet and more so just live a healthier lifestyle. The reason why I got into what I do is because I myself grew up overweight, very insecure, wanting to be in a smaller body was like all I could think about. It was that I obsessed over. And it's what I tried to actively accomplish. But like I think many people do in the beginning when they first try to I'm using air quotes, like take care of themselves.
Yeah.
They go to the extreme. So I underate. I already played sports, but I would like come home from tryouts and practice and exercise more, and it was just a vicious cycle for like the majority of my teens. And then I decided I wanted to go to school to become a registered dietitian so I could learn how to eat. And I wish I could say I like healed my relationship with food overnight like that, but I definitely didn't. Long story short, though, eventually I did, and I became a registered dietitian, and I've been a dietitian now for I think this is going to be my 9th year. So I've been a long time in this space, and now I have an amazing team of dietitians where we help people basically help the person that I once was, and as well as like so many people is where kind of confused, overwhelmed, inundated about what to follow, what works best for you, and really learning to love themselves from the inside out, and then also treating their bodies in a way of care and balance, and just love, So that's what we do today, and that's what I do and why I do it.
I love that. Yes, we have so much in common, I feel like, with how we approach nutrition with people we work with, which is it just like warms my heart to see that as I think our culture is very, very slowly going through that shift. Like when we think of our parents and the Atkins and the whole crazes that were so intense and such hard and fast rules, I feel like we're kind of getting away from that, which makes me excited.
I think so. And then you like go on TikTok and then you're just like,
Uh,
holy crap.
True. Good point. Good point. I'm
It's
not
like
on TikTok.
where are you following and and then also like where do you live? Like I feel like that's like such a big difference too. But I
That's
would say
true.
we're getting there. We have a
Yeah.
lot more work to do. A lot
Yeah.
more work to do, but we're getting. You know what I'll say to that actually? I think we are more aware that that actually is damaging and not helpful. The problem that I think that we're currently experiencing is even though we're aware of it, I think many people are still unsure of now, well, what does that mean? Like now what do I do? Right? Like, and I know you can relate to this. We just recorded for you to be on my podcast and we were talking about kind of like you almost like don't know how to eat or how to trust your hunger, how to listen to your body, or because you've just been dieting for so long or kind of following all these like ridiculous rules, you almost like don't know what to do after that. So I think we're aware of it, but people stay stuck to it because they're really not sure where to go next.
Yeah. And that's one question I wanted to ask you about is when you say, I'm a dietitian who basically teaches people how to not diet, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so it really, I mean, the word diet simply is just the foods that we eat. It's a way of
Right.
eating. So we help people create their way of eating. So they're not necessarily on a diet or following a diet. It just becomes their diet of who they are and it's flexible, right? And so when I think of the word diet, I think of individuality. I think it should be reflective of your cultural food preferences, your likes, your dislikes, any allergies or intolerances. Hopefully they're not on there very often. You're not consuming those foods most often. Um, it's foods that you enjoy. Like it's a way of eating, not so much what you're eating, although kind of what is important part of that. But I think your way of eating and also the why behind your choices matters so much more than like the actual food choice itself. And so that's really where we help people kind of figure out what's the best thing that works for them, that not only is going to address their physical health because that's super important, but never at the expense of their mental health. So I think when you're truly trying to help someone be healthy, you have to be thinking about like physically what are their needs, and also mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all the things. Like how can we create something that cohesively is reflective of something that you can also repeatedly do, right? It's not, I think when people think diet, they think temporary, whereas we think diet, we think long term.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a great way to put it. And I've been working on trying to reframe and I guess just redo how I use that word. Cause my partner, it's so funny. He's very not into fitness and nutrition. And he's always like, why are you saying the word diet? Like, doesn't that just mean what you eat? And I'm like, yes. But in our society, it also kind of means like when you're in a fat loss phase. He's like, that's confusing. I'm like, I know.
Did he
But
grow up on another planet? Where is he
he,
from? Because I'm pretty positive that everyone in the world struggles with diet culture.
yeah, he basically grew up on another planet, West Texas, like very West Texas. So basically,
That's so,
but that
that's
is
so funny.
important, and like it also changing how we use that word can change how we look at our nutrition for a whole year, right? Because if you do decide you want to go through a fat loss phase for health or a really specific goal, that should only be short term. That's not going to be how you eat forever. The trick
Correct.
is then bridging that gap after to, okay, I was doing some short-term rigidity. How do I get back to, like you said, that sustainable? This is just how I eat. This is what serves me. What are some tips that you have for that? Like, I know obviously a lot of this is individual, but
Mhm.
if we were looking at, from a more general lens, are there some things that have really helped you or help your clients?
So you're saying specifically like figure out what to eat or what to do and what works for them without being on diet. Is that what the
Yes.
question is?
Hmm.
Yeah. Huh. So it really comes down to awareness is usually the first part where we're looking at is helping someone to become aware of their choices. And that could be as simple as like writing down what you typically eat in a day. For our clients, we might have them take photos of their food just to kind of see what's going on. But to get away from the rigidity, we might, for some of them, they might track their like, track in something like an app like My Fitness Pal. But I find that when you're trying to get away from that, it's not always the most helpful thing to do initially. So try to bring a more like easy way to bring mindfulness to your choices without having any kind of reminder of any rules or what's how many calories is this, all that. So that way they can focus on the things that might matter, that matter most, which is quality of food. Is there color on the plate? Is it balanced? Right. So we'll usually start with the basics of like at your meals having something that has like a carbohydrate, a protein, and a fat, and a color, some sort of fruit or a vegetable. And now there's guidance there and there's structure there, but it's not super rigid. So it still gives someone guidance to choose what protein they want, to choose what healthy fat they want, to choose their carbohydrate, whatever it is. And once you do that consistently over, a period of time, you then can start to check in like hunger and cravings and then really start to fine tune. But in the beginning, I think the basics is I think a lot of people are under eating. And when we teach them to just start feeding their body more, their body then begins to regulate its own kind of hunger and fullness cues and even things like cravings that you may have craved before when you're just like getting enough protein or enough fiber or eating complex carbs or eating carbs in general. You're no longer now craving, all of these like less complex carbs, these simple carbs, these added sugars. Like you just start to realize like, you know what? Maybe I was craving it because my body was screaming at me that I was hungry. like, so we really just kind of start with the basics, which for some that's actually really hard to eat 3 balanced meals a day, especially depending on your lifestyle. And if you're a history with diet culture, like that in itself can be a little bit scary because someone might think that that's a lot of food. But we try to remind people that particularly the clientele we work with, they tend to, undereat, especially during the day, and then overeat at night or on the weekends. That's like the main people that we work with. And so for them, it's like kind of reminding them that if you don't eat enough during the day, you will most definitely overeat at night, right? So let's stop fearing food. Let's add some more food and fuel in the day when you need it, right? You need it to walk, to run, to go to work, to function, to think. And then from there, once we have some sort of consistency with that, then we can sort of build and be able to now check in with hunger. Whereas before, there was nothing constant or normal, I guess, about your eating. So it's being able to get them to a consistent place, then build, and then building from there.
Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful. And really just want to highlight the example you just shared, like for people who overeat on the nights or the weekends, because I think this is super, super common. I've seen this a lot. The best and fastest way to break out of that cycle is to eat more on the days or at the times where you feel like I binge after XYZ. Okay, the right before, that's when you need to be eating. Like, especially the weekend thing, I can almost guarantee you're restricting Monday through Friday if you
Yeah.
feel like you're constantly overeating on the weekends.
Yeah.
So break that cycle just by eating. Like, that
Yeah.
is such an important highlight that so many people I feel like struggle with. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing we teach a lot is like for most people are walking around like physically hungry, like they're not eating enough during the day, and also like emotionally starving, like pouring into other people, like psychologically drained, like pouring from an empty cup, like basically so like they're psychologically exhausted and then they're physically exhausted and they're under fueled in both of those
Mm-hmm.
areas. When those overlap, that's what I call the danger zone. And when we first work with someone, even though we understand that they might be struggling with emotional eating, and that's definitely something we're going to get to, we actually like to start with like the lowest hanging fruit, which is like your food, because there is some sort of control there that you can take advantage of and get some consistency. And so now we know for a fact, now at night or on the weekends, if you are still emotionally eating or binging or overeating, but you're not physically hungry, at least now we know it's an emotional thing and we can target that rather it being like, well, of course you're hungry, like, or of course you're having these cravings, right? So it's like, is it an emotional craving or is it a physical craving? It's sometimes hard to pinpoint when you're not eating enough during the day and you're also like, pouring into other people and never filling your cup, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's usually a good place for us to start. So then eventually we can get clear and like, okay, this is purely emotional. Now here are the tips and, the steps we can take from there.
Yep. Yep. That totally makes sense. Good point. And I really like how your coaching also has this element of let's focus on the food and what you're eating, but also what is that relationship with our body and with our food.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that is super, super important and neglected a lot of the time. So, I guess my first question is why do so many of us lack that confidence in our choices with our food? Like, where does that kind of start
Mm-hmm.
stemming from?
Everywhere. Mostly from childhood, probably for most. I think, like you mentioned before, a lot of our parents. I mean, I'm 31, so I was born in 1990. I'm about to be 32, actually, which is crazy. But I know, like my parents and my parents' parents, like they were very heavy on dieting, and like fat was in and fat was out, and like carbs were in and then carbs were out, like whatever. And so, I think if you watch that or you see that at home, it's definitely going to impact you. Then when you read the cover of magazines, like, growing up in the early 2000s, like seeing like all the, right next to like Britney Spears or Christina Aguilera kind of like showing their bellies was like how to get abs or do this exercise or cut out carbs or whatever it is. And you're just kind of like, you can't ignore it, right? So I think you have these messages from home, the messages from the media, and then obviously like just kind of being in school and kind of overhearing things. Also like the Clean Your Plate Club. So it's just like a lot of mixed messages, like constantly being thrown at you. And it just, I think at some point we just lose trust with ourselves because the other thing too, I think so many people are just trying to be in a different body than their own because that's what they've been almost like portrayed to believe is that if you're thinner or if you have a bigger butt or you have you're more toned or whatever it is that somehow you're going to be loved and accepted. And I think because of that, people are constantly chasing things outside of themselves rather than focusing on what is it that they want, what is it that they need. And it almost becomes like a habit, honestly. For years, you're looking outside yourself, looking outside yourself, looking outside yourself. And then now we're telling you, I know Caroline and I do, we tell you to like, all right, it's time to come back home to you. And you're like, well, what is that? What does that feel like? What does that look like? I don't even know what home is. Like, what does that mean? Right. And so, um, I think it's because of just the society that we live in, unfortunately, where we get stuck and kind of caught up in that. Um, but you can break free from it,
Mm-hmm.
by the way. So,
It's just like you were talking about with hunger. Like there's that emotional piece and there's a physical piece to hunger. Same thing with all of this bullshit that
mhm.
like tears at our confidence. It's external and then it's that internal questioning our self-worth and things like that too. So I I definitely don't I don't think you or I hope we don't like oversimplify that coming back and doing the internal work while thinking about okay, how do I move? What do I eat? it can be hard because we are basically shut off from that for so long. And not to mention, I mean, gosh, you listing off those things made me think of my first job out of college was a corporate job at like a very large global food company. And they had like half of our big corporate building was research and development. And these people, it was their job to make food cheaper, but taste similar. And how can we get you to eat more so that you
Right.
buy more? So, like,
Right.
let's not forget, like, in this era of so many processed foods being cheap and readily available, they are literally designed in labs to get us to eat more.
Mhm. Absolutely.
just
Absolutely.
just another layer of complication.
And yeah, and then you're like told to go on this diet, go on this diet, and you need to lose weight and like spend your money here and spend your money there. And it's just a catch 22 because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, right? Because it's really just, if you really get down to it, I mean, a lot of these, like even like the diet industry, it's like a multi-billion-dollar industry. I think it's like 78 billion at this point a
Yeah.
year in the US, which is insane. um and it's just like crazy because it's like keeping you stuck. It's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, unless you know, learn how to trust yourself and learn how to, you know, come back home to you and eat more like whole foods. Processed foods are fine, but it's just having that awareness that they are going to be harder for you to stop because they're literally designed for you to just like light up these chemicals in your brain that say, I want more.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. Like I love chips, but I try to be really mindful if I eat something like that because if you eat that distracted in front of the TV when you're stressed
Mhm.
out, like that's what those are made for. It's crazy.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so digging into these the reasons why this is so kind of uncomfortable to come back inwards and rebuild this connection with food and with your body and with your intuition, let's dig into those areas of resistance. Like, I know you have kind of been through this personally, so have I. We work with a lot of people on this topic. When someone comes to you and they're kind of at this point of like, okay, this is what I want to be able to trust my body. I don't want to weigh and measure and track everything I eat. I want more freedom and flexibility, but it's scary, right? It's scary. What's going to happen? Is my body going to change? Am I going to feel less self-worth, less value based on my external changing? Like, what are some ways we can make that feel a little bit easier and more accessible?
Yeah. Oh God, it's I wish I could say it's easy, but it's really not. But I think when you have the support and when you do things slowly, it does definitely help and it does make it easier.
Super sexy
Uh
answer. Yeah.
yeah,
Slow
yeah,
down,
like
ask for help.
yeah, basically. Um yeah, I mean, I think there's a part of you because it also depends on where you're coming from, right? And also everyone's body really is different. So what one person does and the other person does, like they might do the same thing, but one loses weight, one gains weight, and one stays the same, right? And so I think at the end of the day, you really need to define what the goal is and why it's that important to you, and it can't be weight specific. Unless like there's like a real reason. I just don't think that in just every day. It's just you can be healthy at literally you can be healthy at any size, and I know people that sounds like jarring for some, but when you're genuinely taking care of yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally, you really can be healthy at any size. And I think that's the part that I think is the disconnect in society. It's like you're like, what does that mean? And it's like, no, it really genuinely means when you're genuinely taking care of yourself, your body will arrive at the size it's supposed to arrive at, right? So I say that to say that for some you might gain weight, for some you might lose weight, and for some your body might not change, but that's why you have to look. That can't be the thing that you're shooting for, you're aiming for, because it's not as controllable as we think. Like, yes, we can make changes in habits and behaviors that can affect that, but our bodies are designed differently. Everyone's body's shape, size, is different. So with that said, I think we have to kind of like let go of this idea that we have so much control as we think we do. We need to focus on what the goal is outside of the number on the scale. So, things we have our clients focus on is their relationship with food, like being able to go to a restaurant without feeling anxious, or going to a party, or being around food without obsessing over how's this going to fit my macros, what am I eating, when am I eating, you know, that sort of stuff. Your relationship with your body and just being a little bit more, you know, not you're not going to you're not going to go from hating it to loving it overnight, but at least practicing like body acceptance and just like starting to become more aware of like what your body is able to do for you. I think that's usually a great goal. And feeling good and confident in your skin, it doesn't come from changing the way that you look. It comes from like consistently putting in the work. So it could be like hitting PRs in the gym, focusing on just wanting to feel fitter or stronger. Like that could be a great goal as well. And I think just when you start to focus on, even a step past that, not so much the outcome, but even more so the behavior, like you just want to like hydrate better, you want to sleep better, you want to maybe do some more meditation or yoga or some sort of stress management thing, and you really start to focus on those things that really are just going to eventually lead you to that thing that you ultimately want to be, which is happier and healthier. Then you'll slowly start to be able to let go of this idea of that's what it looks like, because it can look different for everyone and everything, and also at every stage, right? So instead of focusing on the outcome, focus on the behavior and really work towards just honoring your wants and needs more and more every single day. And I think eventually we can like start to let go of this identity of like what it needs to look like or what it should look like, because I think a lot of women especially, they compare themselves to younger versions of themselves or versions of themselves when they were like maybe not, they didn't have a family and kids. Like okay, like listen, moms can, you guys can do it all. Like I'm a stepmom, I consider myself a stepmom. I've never been pregnant and I've never had a child come out of my body. So I literally don't know, but all I know is that you're a rock star. But with that said, there's some moms that, find a way to make it work, and good for you. And there's other moms that have just decided, you know what, it's too much effort and energy. That doesn't mean I'm neglecting my self-care and my body, but I'm just choosing to care for my body differently in this stage of life, because this is a different season of life. It's a different stage of life. So it would be unfair to that woman who now had, 20 years later, because I work with women in their 40s that are comparing themselves to their 20-year-old body. And I need to just remind them, like, it's a different body and also a different time. And that's okay, but you can be healthy in many different ways and at many different sizes. It can be flexible. So I think where people get themselves in trouble is they have like this one way, this specific identity, just this idea in their mind of what it's supposed to look like and what it should look like. And you really need to let go of that and just trust that when you focus on the behaviors and those small changes and just coming back to you, eventually you'll start to see that, oh wow, like I actually am really glad I like let go of that part of me. I'm proud of that part of me, but that was an old part of me, and I'm excited for this new part. And you start to kind of fall in love with yourself again and in love with your body, or even loving it for the first time.
Yep. Yeah. It's such a process. It's not like, I feel like coming back to your body and rebuilding that trust, a lot of people say that's what they want, but they think it's the same as I want to lose 10 pounds or I want to add 10 pounds to my back squat or something like that, which is relatively linear, right? You can kind of make a plan with your nutrition or with your training and go. But this idea of rebuilding your relationship with food and your body and self-love and trust, it's much more of a process that's like, okay, I'm going to kind of wind this way. I don't know, maybe that doesn't feel super good. I'm going to kind of wind the other way. And you have to like weave back and forth through
Yeah.
this gray area until you're like, oh, wow, I do feel really good now. Just like you said, like I don't miss that old version of me because right now I feel so good. But it's not
Mm-hmm.
just that like, boop, okay, I'm here now. We're all nope.
Yeah.
Like your body's
It's
gonna change forever.
uncomfortable. It's
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. Trust. I shared about this in my book, and we were talking on when you came on the podcast. We recorded yesterday. I'm not sure how far these are coming out together, but um, there was a period in my journey where I had, and this is crazy to even like, and I'd admitted it on many podcasts before, and it's in my book, so like whatever. But like, I mean, at this point, I had been a dietitian for like 5 or 6 years. Like, I wasn't stupid. And I don't want to like. Point being, I had all the knowledge in the world,
Yeah.
right? Like, but I'm still a human, and I still live in a world of diet culture, and I still have a history of disordered eating, and I still grew up overweight. And now, if anything, in my mind, because once again, I was doing it for external validation, I was trying to prove to the world, because I should, right? Or I'm a dietitian, so I need to look the part, whatever that means. And basically, long story short, I had gotten to like a super leanest I've ever been. But the way to get there was through extremes, and I started teetering back into this disordered eating that I actually said in the book, like if I didn't, basically I ended up getting sick because I was underfed. I had all these gut issues. I was exhausted. I was hitting walls like crazy because my cortisol was completely off. Like there was just so much stuff going on because I literally just overtrained and underfed to get to this point. Like I got stuck back into that old bit from like when I was a teenager. Like I hadn't done that in years. And I somehow got suckered back into it. And what this craziest part is the amount of, I mean, we all know it, but like the compliments on my body. But then I also got people, I'll never forget this. I'll share this really quick. There was one point when I was a dietitian and I was working for another company. I didn't have my own business yet. And I had a woman come into my office and literally ask me how I was going to help her to lose weight if I was overweight myself. Because I've always had a larger frame and a bigger body. And I don't even, whatever standard you want to call it. Maybe I was carrying a little extra weight, but like either way, completely invalid and not called for, right? Now, fast forward to that part of my life I was just explaining, I had people telling me I was getting too skinny. And like, I'm like a curvy girl. So like, I don't even know if that's like a possibility. I feel like I would have to like literally never eat to get like too skinny because that just like, I have so many, like that just like doesn't work. I don't know how that would work. But all I had to say, I was like, that's when I was like, wait a minute. That like was like, I need to chill because this person says I'm too big. This person says I'm too small. This person says I look amazing. It doesn't matter what other people think or what other people say. I need to define what's enough for me, right? And it's not a number because every time I got to my goal weight, I kept moving the number. I was like, oh, I did this. I could put 5 more pounds. Oh, I could do this. Oh, I could do another 5. I'm like, you know what? Maybe 5 more pounds. Then technically, not only will then I can get my body fat to this. Like, so, for so long, I was always in the overweight category, like with BMI. And even though I knew better, it still bothered me. And so I finally got to this place of quote unquote normal. And then when I got there, I was like, okay, that's it. That's all I want. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. No, but now I can like play with my body fat. Like now I can go leaner. And all that to say, like, if you're listening to this, which you are, thankfully, you're not alone and it's really hard. But that the reason why I'm bringing this up is because for me to finally let go of that, I had to let go of the restriction. I had to put on some weight and I had to let go of this idea that I needed to look the part or to look a certain way in order to be successful, in order to have a thriving career. Like, finally, and thank God I did, because people were working with me regardless of what my body looks like, except for that one woman from my old corporation. When it's your own business, you can choose your clients. So,
Yeah.
so if anyone were to say that to me on a discovery call, I'd say bye.
Seriously. Oh my God. That's pretty
Yeah.
insane that,
Yeah.
I feel like those keyboard warriors are everywhere these days, but like in person
Everywhere.
is like, oh, okay, you're on
Uh-huh.
another level. But I really like what you shared, and thank you for being so raw on here. I really appreciate that. And I can definitely relate to the external validation. Been
Yeah.
there for sure. But what's crazy is I feel like how when you're in that phase and you're kind of living for everyone else's definition of enoughness, the flip side of that, where I feel like where I've gotten now is almost like instead of all those different definitions you're trying to live up to, you have like all these other doors open because you have so much time back, you have so much mental energy back, you have more internal confidence versus confidence based on what other people say or how they view you. It's
Mm-hmm.
like this total flip in the best way possible because there is so much more open to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's life. Life
There's
is
life.
more than going to the gym. I mean, literally, like, my life was just about, like, what I was eating, what I was cooking, and when I was working out.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then my business,
Yep.
which it, like, somehow it was, like, acceptable because it was, like, my job,
Mm-hmm.
per se.
Yeah.
But that's not acceptable. Your life, there's a lot more to life
I
than
know.
counting macros.
Yes,
Trust me.
for real.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned your book while you were talking, which is something I really want to
Yeah.
get into. So maybe this is a good segue. Like, I wanted you to tell us how dating and dieting are related and kind of how
Yes.
that plays into your book.
Yeah, so as I shared before, I grew up overweight and insecure, and I tied my weight to my worth. And specifically, I don't know if it's because, I mean, from the youngest age of the third grade, it was a boy who teased me about my weight, and every year after that, it was always a boy who teased me about my weight. So that plus the messaging, that you see in the media. The book is called Once Upon a Diet, for many reasons, obviously like fairy tales and whatever and love, but also like if you think about the Disney princesses, they're all the same hourglass shaped figure. They all get the guy in the end. So I never saw someone in a bigger body depicted in the media as the one getting the guy. And if so, you think of things like the movie Shallow Hal, you think of Princess Diaries, you think of She's All That. Like these movies, if you've ever seen them, it's all about the woman needs to look a certain way in order to get the guy, right? So it's basically like change everything about yourself and then you'll be happy, right? And then you'll find Prince Charming. So I really did believe that. And I was also directly told by family members that if I didn't lose the weight, I would never get a boyfriend. So it really was just like in my subconscious of like, I needed to do something because if not, I will never get married. I will never find love. I will never, all these things, right? And so unfortunately, what that did is even after I lost the weight, it's still, once again, that story of it never felt like enough, but it also made me settle for less than ideal circumstances because I just like my goal was to get the guy. It was never like the quality of the relationship, the quality of the guy. So I stayed in situations way longer than I should have or needed to, all out of fear of rejection or having to try again or like who else is going to love me. And it was just like really chaotic and traumatic, honestly, for a few of them. And so the way this concept kind of came about is I actually realized that I definitely wasn't alone in this. And that also a lot of women, before they would come into the program, is we would kind of watch them like jump from diet to diet, as I'm sure you have as well. And they kept hoping that each diet was like quote unquote the one. And so I made the realization, it's like, oh my God, they're like Cinderella's stepsisters. Like they're just going around trying to jam their feet into something that clearly is never going to work for them. Like it's
That
never
is
going to fit.
a great
Right.
analogy.
Yeah. So that was the initial thought process. And I actually gave a TED talk back in February 2020 and I only had 8 minutes to talk. And because I only had 8 minutes and I was like, okay, that's not enough time, but like maybe I can make it work. And then as I was starting to realize like all the different parallels between dieting and dating and romantic relationships, I realized, holy crap, Toni, you need to write a book. Like there is not enough to go in an 8 minute TED talk. There's not enough even if I had a 20 minute TED talk. Like there's just so much here that needs to be unpacked. So that's how I birthed the book. Now 2 years later, it is in the universe. I'm so excited about it. Yeah. So Once Upon a Diet, you can get it on Amazon. It's my heart and joy. I'm like so proud of it.
Oh, and you have the cutest cover ever, which I told you.
Thank
I like it's
you.
just so cute to look at.
This goes
But
on YouTube. I'll show it for those who are watching on
yes, gorgeous,
YouTube.
gorgeous. And I mean, that is, oh my God, I can't believe how similar our histories are. Cause like that's whenever I think back on, where cause my mom definitely was not a dieter. But I still developed my own disordered eating and I have done a lot of work and healing around that. I'm like, man, when were those first times that I felt like my confidence, my inner strength was really, really damaged? And it was boys teasing me in like middle school. And like, it's crazy how at the time, like, yeah, it sucked, but it didn't like, there was nothing crazy that happened to me. But then later in life, it's that showed up again, and that can really, really affect you. So that's just another kind of reward of like going deeper with yourself so that you can heal some of these wounds. Cause I really, like, yeah, that was another thing that was uncomfortable to do. But looking at it then allows you to recreate the future that you actually want.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I absolutely love that Cinderella analogy of dieting and shoving your foot into all these different slippers, trying to get one to fit. Were there
Yeah.
other like dating analogies that came up in your book that you were like, oh, this one's gold?
There's so many, like every chapter, like literally every chapter. But I'll give you like kind of the brief analysis that I shared like in the TED talk, and then if you want to go deeper, I'd recommend definitely reading the book, which is a
Yeah.
quick read, by the way. Like people have told me they finished it in a day, and it's like 300 pages. No, it's not. It's 180, 178. I think when I wrote it, it was 300, but then with the paper that I chose, it was like whatever. Anyways, um, so like for a lot of people, I think so there's three questions I have people ask themselves before they're gonna try something new, whether it be a diet or even a new relationship, so that they don't repeat the old patterns. And what I say is like that stepsister cycle. It's like we want to break that stepsister cycle. We don't want to keep trying to force something to fit when it's not gonna fit, right? So the main thing that I have people ask is like, will this last past the honeymoon phase? And so this honeymoon phase, both in relationships, both in dieting, it's like when anything's new, it's exciting, you're motivated, you're on your best behavior, like things are rocking, right? And it's the end of that honeymoon phase where's the turning point, right? And so for some, it's like they'll start to notice that, oh, wow, now that the work begins. And you have to decide, it's like, are you willing to put in that work? Right. Or are you not? And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with a short term fling. Like if you want to do something, short term, that's fine. Whether it's, dating someone or, choosing to count every macro and like, follow a specific meal plan, whatever. But you have to understand that that's temporary. Right. So it's like if you're trying to take that honeymoon or like that the honeymoon phase or like that short term that summer fling and you're trying to make a marriage out of it, like you're going to be miserable. Absolutely miserable. Right. So that was one of the analogies that I kind of shared about in the book. And then it's like for those who are following something, the second question to ask is like, past that honeymoon phase, of the relationship or the diet or whatever, you need to check in and ask yourself, like, do I even like this? Like, do I still like this? Because things do change. And so that doesn't mean you need to like break up with your partner or even stop doing whatever it is that you're following. But if you're not liking it anymore, you're going to have to make some shifts, right? And if you're not making shifts but then you're settling, let's like that's not why you got into it. That's not why you did it, right? So that's the second question. And then the last question, which is at like kind of afterwards. So if the relationship didn't work out or you're coming out of a diet phase or you did a diet or you did a program and it like just didn't work, like why didn't it work? Like what are the lessons that I learned from this, right? Because truly nothing is really a waste of your time unless if it taught you something, right? But I think the problem is a lot of people just go from one diet to another diet or one relationship to the other another relationship, but they're never doing that introspective work, right? They're never really checking in. It's like, what was it about me? What was it about the partner? What was it about my body? What was it about the food? What was it about the method? Like there's a lot of more questions we can go a little bit deeper and be honest with ourselves and really ask, like, why didn't it work? And it's not that you're a failure or that, it's not, yeah, you're not a failure. It's like not about half the diets out there really are not meant to be long term. So like it's not even about that, but we do also have to take a little bit of responsibility so that we don't stay in that cycle, right? If we're basically doing another analogy I say is like a lot of people are going to a different diet, but it's basically the same diet, just in a different book, right? Or like I dated 5 versions of the same guy, just with a different name and a different face. It's like it looks different, but it's the same.
Yep.
Like, it is the same, right? So those are the things that I think people need to like take a little bit like a bigger look at,
Mm-hmm.
if they really want to break free from that.
Yeah, yeah, and definitely pick up the book if you like where we're going with this, because those analogies are really, I mean, they hit home for me. I'm like, oh my god, that makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely check that out if you want to learn more. And one thing, maybe we can bring a little bit more realism, if you will, to our podcast, because I feel like you and I are both on this maybe the other side of the mountain that people want to get to, but I don't want to paint the picture like, oh, every time I look in the mirror, though, I just ooze self confidence and I love myself and
Mm-hmm.
everything's perfect. I have days like that, yeah. But it's not like, again, like it's not like you get to this point and everything is just rosy forever and ever and ever and ever. So, can you kind of share on that too? Like, even though you're on the other side of the mountain, what are some fluctuations you still feel? What do you kind of still deal with that's like, okay, I'm in this happy, healthy place with food, but there are still ups and downs.
Yeah. So like anyone, this is advice for anyone. Like if I'm having a bad body image day, which aren't as frequent as they used to be, so that's also a way to measure progress. I think the people think that it's like if once they're healed, it's like they're perfect and they never have a bad body image day. It's like no, it's that you have them less often, and when you do have them, you know not to like react to it or engage and let it spiral into like disordered eating habits, right? So whenever I this actually just happened the other day. I had a bad body image day as I was working out. Isn't it always the best? That's the part where I'm just like, where the mirrors are there, and here you are doing something good for your body, and yet you're criticizing it. And their mirrors were everywhere. And it was funny because I was like one mirror, and then I went to the next mirror, and it's like I look different in different mirrors. And that's when I realized, like, hello, Toni, back up. Like you can't possibly look drastically different. It's a different mirror. So your body didn't drastically change from taking a step to another step, right? You're looking at the mirror, you're looking also from a different lens. At that night, that day, I didn't have a good night's sleep the night before. And I went to the bathroom later, sorry if this is TMI, and I got my period, which always around my period, I call it my period brain. My period brain looks and sees things differently. So for whatever reason, even though I track my cycle, it still surprises me. I'm 32 years old and I'm still always like, oh, that's why. Like, that's why I've been seeing myself in distorted view. That's why my brain's like telling me I'm doing everything wrong. That's why I'm more anxious. That's why I can't fall asleep at night. Like, during periods of your life, like, and then we just take it out on our bodies because it's something tangible,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I share that to let people know that your mind might tell you when you're having a bad body image day that now you need to work out longer, or you need to say, screw it, what's going to change? I'm just going to go binge. Or it might say to yourself, oh, now I'm going to have to go on a diet, or I'm not going to eat carbs, or I'm never eating any sugar, or blah, 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 like, and go to the extremes. But you just have to remind yourself that it's just a moment. Acknowledge it as a moment, replace criticism with compassion, and also get curious, right? So like, am I stressed? Am I tired? Am I PMSing? Did I eat a food that doesn't agree with me? Maybe I'm like physically bloated, and so yeah, it looks like I'm bigger because I'm physically just, maybe I didn't go to the bathroom, maybe I didn't have a bowel movement, like whatever it is. Like, just recognize it, get curious with it, and then just trust it's going to pass, because it always does, right? Some days we wake up and we feel like rock stars, and other days we wake up and we're like, what am I doing on this planet? Like, not, and sorry if that was, but point is, like, we have these ups and downs. And so sometimes you just have to just know that, like, okay, you're just having a moment, like you're just having, and that's why I even would call it from like a bad body image day to even a bad body image moment,
Mm-hmm.
because it really is just a moment. So we have to not allow it to take over the whole day, because that whole day can take over the whole week, which can take over the month, which can take over the whole year. And we really need to just start treating it as a moment and just not responding to it, because when you respond to it, you get caught back up in that cycle, the disordered eating, the extremes, the restriction, and then it's really hard, right? So you just almost just have to recognize it, acknowledge it, let it pass, move on, and trust that later that day or tomorrow, you'll feel better and you'll see yourself differently, and that's okay.
Yeah. And that's such a great opportunity too, to check in with your body. One, just like you said, how did I sleep? What time of the month is it for me? Those
Yeah.
types of questions. And also to learn. Then, like, depending on how you answer those questions, you can start to learn this long-term sustainable approach to wellness, like we've been talking about this whole time, based on, oh, wow, you know what? I have been super stressed out with that work deadline this week. I think this is how my body's responding to that stress. Or
Mm-hmm.
I did sleep like crap. Wow, that's really good to know that this is how my body responds when I only get 6 hours instead of 8 hours of sleep. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how you can really start to choose what are those big rocks for you and your wellness routine that you really need to put the time and effort into. And I also really liked how you touched on a marker of progress there. Because I think a lot of people, when they don't have like a quote unquote weight loss goal, they're like, well, how do I measure progress? And I was just working with a client on this who felt like comparison of her body to other women's body was like a huge roadblock for her. But then, so she had texted me and she's like, oh, it was such a bad Saturday. I just like kept thinking about this woman's body, but then this and this and this happened. She's like, I just feel like I'm stuck here though. I'm like, wait a second. Like a month ago, you would have obsessed
Mm-hmm.
about this for at least a week. You just told me that you were in this comparison mode and out of it like within a matter of hours. that is a huge improvement. So remembering
Mm-hmm.
to also like look for those markers of progress can be crazy motivating during this kind of phase.
Definitely, definitely. And just to which just reinforces what you were just sharing is that like we didn't get to where we're at overnight. Like we had lots of ups and downs and in betweens and but we did look for those little small moments of victory because it was what motivated us to keep going and to keep trying and to keep trusting the process. That's really 3 words, trust the process. Yeah, it is like drill it into your head. I feel like I should probably get it tattooed on my forehead.
I know. I used to get like, oh my God, I would get so pissed off when people said like, trust the process. But I'm like, there's not really a better way to say it. Like, you just got to lean into it.
Yeah, yeah, for
So
sure.
this was such an amazing episode. Oh my gosh. It was such a blast to have you here to talk about this like super, super important part of health and wellness that I feel like is so overlooked. So thank you for your time today and share a little bit more about where people can grab your book. How can people connect with you and learn from you more?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. If you want to read my book, you can get it on Amazon. It's called Once Upon a Diet, and there's an audio version, a ebook version, and also the paperback. And if you want to connect with me further, I'm on Instagram at tips underscore with underscore Toni. That's Toni with an I. I also have the Tips with Toni podcast. And if you're interested in any courses or working with a dietitian on my team one to one, go to tipswithtoni.com and just click whichever tab you're looking for. So coaches for coaching or courses for courses.
Fabulous. Definitely check out those links in the show notes, you guys. And we will talk to you next week. If you loved this episode, send it to a friend, send it to a family member, share it on your story and tag us. And thank you for listening.